it's the least you can do with political engagement, right? Get involved locally, as you said. Get involved with your local DSA, because if it's just about electoralism, you're going to feel a little bit alienated, right? Because you're not Biden. For most young people, he doesn't represent them. Like he doesn't necessarily connect with them. And that's why voting, I would imagine, or I would advocate, should be something that you do, but not necessarily where your political engagement ends.
I agree with that, but I would say that voting is the most important thing, and almost nothing else matters if you're not willing to vote. There's way too much online activism. It happens in the streamer world, it happens in the YouTube world, it happens on Twitter. You can tweet all you want, but at the end of the day, lawmakers, rightfully so, only respond to what voters want. Their constituents are the people that actually go to the polls and vote for them. There's a reason why, criminal justice looks the way it does in the United States, and it's because the demographic of people voting are not the demographic of people that are most often impacted by the criminal justice system. And I think that, when we say voting is the least we can do, I mean, young people don't do it. They don't vote. And if you're not willing to vote, nobody's going to, and they shouldn't listen to you, because at the end of the day, a politician's job is to get reelected. And if you're not going to go out and actually show up and vote for said politicians, why should they ever listen to anything you have to say?
Yeah, and the NLRB and the FTC right now are probably the best cases to make that point, that politics and elections actually do matter. Because if you're somebody who says, well, actually, the only thing I care about is, organizing Starbucks or organizing Amazon or supporting the UAW, if you don't have a National Labor Relations Board that is supportive of labor rights, it's going to be a much tougher climb. And even when it comes to antitrust and monopoly, that touches everything. The inability of people to make any significant revenue on podcasts is all about antitrust. The inability of people to kind of speak freely is related to the power of Silicon Valley that is now being contested by Joe Biden's FTC, because he won and because he appointed people like Lena Khan. I think people trash vote blue no matter who all the time, but there's actually, if you're on in the progressive wing of the party, I've often seen that kind of used in reverse, in that, let's say you get John Fetterman across the finish line in Pennsylvania. He won a primary against a right-wing Democrat. Because vote blue no matter who exists, all of the kind of conservative Democrats in the state were like, all right, I'm voting for John Fetterman.
Yeah.
And actually, AOC gets knocked a lot for that mama bear comment that she made about Pelosi.
Well, it was true.
She said that at the time where it looked like Bernie was going to seize the nomination. And so what she was trying to do is say, look, Bernie's going to be the nominee.
Right.
Pelosi is supportive of whoever the nominee is. Everyone else then needs to get behind Bernie, and you kind of use that vote blue no matter who momentum to say, look, you don't have a choice. He's the blue. So guess what? Vote for him. You're a socialist now.
100%. I mean, and by the true part, I just meant to say that, Nancy Pelosi, for all of her faults, she always had an ability to reach a bunch of different people in the caucus, right? And she developed those kinds of relationships, including with AOC. I thought what you were going to say was that some of the left online criticized the fact that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was using her excess fundraising money to help other Democrats in more vulnerable positions. And I found that criticism to be quite silly, because that's an exercise in leverage, right? And she's using her political capital to get something done behind the scenes. And just because we don't see it in public, you're going to hear about that maybe in a year or so. Or you may never hear about some of the gains that she gets. But that's kind of the stuff that we don't see that happens when you actually have people who are sane in the positions of power. And Lena Khan, I mean, what is this? The best FTC chair that we've seen in
certainly
decades?
Most aggressive, yeah.
I mean, since the 60s or whatever. Same in terms of Biden's posture towards labor. So it's not about voting for the person like they're a celebrity. We're not electing class president.
Right, and it doesn't mean you endorse the drug war because you voted for Joe Biden.
This isn't The Bachelor, where you're not picking somebody to marry. You're picking somebody who's a figurehead. And all of the people that come along with that person, the people that are, heading those agencies, that's what you have to keep in mind. So it's this whole, it's broadening elections outside of celebrity to coalitions.
Yeah, and if you really don't like Manchin and Sinema, if you don't like these Democrats that sit right on the edge, the easiest way to take power from them isn't to primary them. It's to just have more Democrats in office. If there are 55, 57, 60 blue senators, Manchin and Sinema don't matter as much anymore because we don't need to appeal to them, to that like very center-leaning, center-right-leaning political or economic agenda in order to get what we want through the Senate.
Although in some cases you can primary. If the Democrat is likely to win the general election, like in Arizona, then you can primary Sinema and Ruben Gallego.
Maybe Sinema.
In Arizona, maybe,
Right.
yeah, but in West Virginia...
West Virginia, forget about it.
Well, primaries have value.
Arizona's kind of wacky, though, but yeah.
The more democracy that exists, I think, is the better. And primaries have value in terms of also pushing incumbents where they don't feel too cozy. They don't feel like they can rest on their laurels and not represent people anymore.
I think, we're talking about electoralism, which is of course vital, but I think that at the fundamental, like, personal level, so often it's about convincing a person that what they can do can make a difference, like on any level. I saw the most incredible statistic the other day. Apparently something like 60% of the book bans in this country, like school boards banning this because they mention gay people in it or something, like all that. There's been thousands of them, right? 60% of them from 11 people. Just very dedicated folks calling around. They're not in the district, they're just calling around, making a fuss, traveling. It is remarkable, especially at a local level, how much single people can do.
I've heard stories of like housing developments held up because
yes.
old lady goes to every single city council meeting. She knows every single person on the board and she's always giving speeches. There's a joke I tell on my stream. There's a stoplight outside my house that I hated, and they were finally marking the stoplight for deletion. And I remember one day this lady knocked on my door and she had a little petition to sign to save the stoplight. And I'm like, no, this stoplight is the dumbest stoplight in the world. I'm so glad it's changing stop signs. I have a son. I walk into school. It's not a dangerous intersection. And I kind of laughed it off and she walked away or whatever. And 2 weeks later, God damn it, she saved the goddamn stoplight. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I should have been running a counter petition. But there is an ungodly amount of power available, but it's at the local level. And that's like not sexy. Everybody wants to talk about like Biden and Ukraine and AOC and that's it. And then it's like, well, who's your mayor? What do you do locally? Because that's where just like 5 or 10 people can sometimes exert massive influence on some of your policies. But it's just not, it's not talked about on Twitter as much, so nobody goes for it as much.
You go to almost any city, and the downtown area is almost completely controlled civically by city councilors who are in the suburbs. So to them, it's just a shopping destination. But for like 100,000 people, it's home. And there's this disconnect. And it's almost always because the people in the suburbs are old and retired and have the time to run and the money to run, and they show up. And that is to their benefit, but like there's nothing about that isn't transferable to like a young, like just out of college sort of entrepreneurial engaged activist. It can be done, but a lot of people, especially on the left, it's not that they set their hopes too high. Hope should be high. But the expectations of what any individual can do, I think a lot of people are touting around, historical revolutionary dreams, when in reality, the real way you get power in this country and in any situation is by knowing who your local councilors are and calling them often enough to be annoying. Showing up is 90% of political power. And a lot of people don't want to do that because it's not sexy. And I think that making that sexy, or at least convincing people it's worthwhile, that's a really big part of it.
I also wish for a lot of like far left, because I've probably fought with all of you at some point over far left activism online. I wish that instead of...
I'm sorry.
Instead of... You might not know me, but okay. Instead of pushing... Sure.
He owned you so hard you forgot
Absolutely,
about it.
yeah. Lots of Twitter
No,
clips.
I know you debated Sam, but I don't really know anything else.
Sure, it's possible.
I don't remember any
sorry.
fight.
Okay, that's all good. You drank a lot, I guess. No. Instead of like or, I wish it could just be like and. Like, instead of looking at, well, the mainstream Dems won, it's either them or my progressives, and since they won, now I'm checked out of the process. Like, how many people were disillusioned after Bernie lost, and it's like, oh, superdelegates suck, and the system sucks, and you disengage. I wish there was more of like it's good to vote blue and to get Dems in, and we need to build on this and move it further left than, say, somebody like me would want. But moving and moving and moving while still supporting the establishment, rather than being like, well, if the establishment is winning, I don't want anything to do with it, I'm going to unplug completely until I get like my ideal socialist revolution or progressive revolution or whatever. I think that disconnect is just so cancerous for young people. I don't want to make Feinstein jokes here, but like if young people voted, the composition of Congress would be way different, right? It would be way, way, way different if the electorate was more evenly composed of all the age groups rather than skewing so heavily towards only older people that seem to be more, like you said, live in the suburbs and are more plugged in. And yeah.
What I'd say to that is that those young people that you're talking about who got disaffected by the results of the 2016 primary, they're not an organized bloc. They're not really a thing. They're a lot of people who have, ideas about things. The party establishment is an organized thing, and so in that sense, between those two groups, the party establishment has a lot more agency. They can organize together. They can meet, and they can decide how they're going to interact with their, at that point,